Well, thank you very much for joining me in this video. I don't know if you've had this happen before or not, but it does happen from time to time. You get a property listed for sale, get some activity, some showings, and you get a call from another agent saying they're bringing you in an offer. Sure enough, the offer comes in, it's negotiated back and forth, and then it dies. You just don't come to a meeting of the mind between the two parties. So you're back to square one. A couple of days later, another agent calls you who's shown the property and says they're getting an offer. So the question is, do you need to go back to the first party who put in an offer and notify them that another offer is coming in and give them the opportunity to jump back in and get in a competition? The answer to that question is no. There's no requirement to do that. Now, you might say, well, why wouldn't you? Because you want to get the highest price possible for your client, the seller, and if you can get two people competing back and forth, then maybe you can get a higher price. That's what we want for our seller. But you are not compelled to, and it's up to the seller. And there may be reasons why not. We've had this happen. In fact, it happened last week, but some time ago, a year or so ago, we had this exact same situation happen. A second offer came in after the first offer had died. A second offer came in, and the agent asked her principal, the seller, if they wanted to have the first party notified and see if we can get two offers in play again. And the seller said, no, they had their chance. I don't want to work with them. Let's see what we can do with the second offer. Well, the first agent, when they found out the property was sold, was furious. They called me up and they told me this was unethical and on and on. I tried to explain to them the act and how it goes and so on. They didn't want to hear. So they took it to RICO, and of course, RICO threw it out. The seller sent a letter saying, I made it clear to my agent that I didn't want to work with these people. They'd had their chance. I wanted to work with a second one. That's the end of the story. The seller is your client and they're king. But I want you to know that it's very imperative that you involve the client. It isn't the sort of thing that you do on your own. It could be another one where the offer comes in, it's negotiated, it dies, and then the listing agent procures their own offer. Well, there'd be the natural desire to not be in competition, so you're sure that you're winning, so you're going to double end it, but that may not be the best interest of your seller, and your seller is the person that you're working for. But there are situations where it makes sense to not bring the other party in, and this has happened a few times over the years. You have a property for sale, and you have a party who's interested in buying the property, and you tell them that there's another offer coming in, and they say, well, then I don't want to submit an offer. I'm not interested in being in competition. If it doesn't sell, keep me in mind. So an offer comes in, it's negotiated, it doesn't come together, and property's back open with no offers coming in. So you contact the person who was interested and they prepare an offer. Now, if you contacted the person who was negotiating their offer and they come back in again, your person that you've got now is going to drop out because they made it clear they don't want to be in competition. So in a situation like that, with the involvement of the seller, you wouldn't go back to the first person. Now, the first party agent isn't going to be happy about that. They'd like to get back in and try and negotiate a deal. But it's a situation where it just doesn't make sense to involve the first party when the second one refuses to be in competition. But I want to stress it's so important that you make these decisions conjunction with your client, not in isolation from your client. And let me get sidetracked a little bit and say that I think there's some things that we in organized real estate do that frustrate this relationship between the agent and the client. Remember, we are on obligation to obey the lawful instructions of our principal. Let's take lock boxes, for example. I know I'm beating a dead horse because it's changed now, but our board had a situation where they made it mandatory to use electronic lock boxes, and they wouldn't even allow you to use a manual one in conjunction with the electronic one. Nope, it's got to be electronic. Well, what if your client didn't want an electronic lockbox? They wanted a manual lockbox. Didn't matter. Well, their lawful instruction is put on a manual lockbox, but the organization of the board prevents you from doing that. Let's suppose your board, I don't think Niagara does now, but I think Toronto does, has a minimum amount of time that the listing has to run before they will accept it on. Let's say it's 30 days. Suppose you've got a client and wants to list for only 2 weeks, and suppose you're willing to do that. I wouldn't necessarily encourage that, but for whatever reason, you're willing to do that. Maybe you get a buyer and you need some time to negotiate. You want to make sure the price is established and the commission is established and so on. So you want a short-term listing. If the bylaws of the board prevent you from bringing in a listing that's less than 30 days and you have a 15-day listing, there's nothing you can do. You say, well, I'll just do it exclusive. No, the Canadian Real Estate Association says you can't do it exclusive, and any types of advertising and marketing, including putting up a sign or anything, within 3 days it's got to go MLS. So the system is contravening the rights of the consumer, who is your client. And we've got to be very, very careful of that. So going back to what I said before, yes, you can have any negotiation, the deal can die, a new offer can come in. You don't have to notify the first party. Make sure, though, that your client is in agreement in that decision, because the client is king. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. I'll talk to you again next week.